Okay. Excuse me. Good morning, everyone. Brand new week. It's Tuesday. It's the Senate Transportation Committee. Our first item on the agenda is paving. We always get an update from the Paving Association of what happened last year. And we all know that things were a little different last year. We're looking forward to this year. We're got a large budget for paving this year, $129 to $30 million. Anyway, we have Nick Sherman, lobbyist for the Paving Association. I'd like to lead off and
Sure.
join us at the end of the table here.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I was hoping we'd have some paving folks here.
Well, we have Tyson from Pike. Would it be okay if we start
Sure, yeah.
together?
Absolutely.
With this?
Yeah.
And we're trying to get Tyler Pratt from Peckham Industries up on here, but I think we're having some technical difficulties. So see if we could figure that out.
Well, we know we went through a trying year with supply and labor and everything else, and I'm sure that the costs were up substantially over the previous years, but you know, someday we increase the paving budget every year, and we're doing very well financially on that, but probably we're doing fewer miles because of the cost factor. So give us a little update what your perspective is on.
Sure. Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, Senators. Good morning. It's nice to be here in person. The first time in a long time. My name is Nick Sherman. I'm with Leonine Public Affairs, and we represent the Paving Association of Vermont. And
I'm Tyson Schweenard. I'm with Pike Industries.
Morning. Been with Pike a while, or?
I've been with Pike, this is my 16th season.
Oh, we never get to see you. It's the first time, I think.
So where's Jay today?
He is either at a meeting or he's out sick. I talked to you, he sounded a little under the weather this morning when I chatted with him.
sounds like he's making excuses.
Yeah.
Your company, myself, but your company shut down in the winter. Did you do anything else?
We do seasonal layoffs. I estimate projects all winter long and plan for the, following season and about those aspects. So that's what we do during the winter times, rather slow.
And does the agency come out with their proposals early enough so that it was an issue years ago? Excuse me, they weren't coming out early enough, but
Yep.
hoping the agency would be here today.
So the agency, probably 4 years ago, started putting out, I'd say 3 or 4 projects in the fall. And that's helped tremendously in planning. And then as usual, December, January timeframe, there's always a lag. And then just recently we started bidding work again. So usually mid-January, they start advertising. Then last week we did 1 project.
So do you have some projects that you bid on that have been approved?
Yes. Yep. We've
That are
6 or 7, I think.
That would be this fall,
This
and
coming-
this spring and
yep.
summer?
So we did 3 projects last fall. We were successful on 2 of them. And so those have all gone through the contract award process. We've started planning and, we'll
So where are those projects?
we have Barton Derby Surf Project up on 91. And then we
Because
recently,
it was Linden to Barton, so now it's Barton to,
yeah.
okay.
So we still got to complete the northbound barrel to Linden to Barton. And then the next 8 or 9 miles, both barrels will be done by September, I think. That's a different surface treatment. That's a pave replace project. Whereas Linden Barton's a conventional 2-inch mill and shim and overlay project. And then just recently we were awarded the Montpelier, I call it the River Street project down here. That's a night work project. So that one we're starting the planning process to get out in gates, late April and hit the road running, so to
So
speak.
will that go up to the roundabout?
That goes up to the bridge winter set just completed. So, and through the roundabout and then spurs off to Wayside.
Yeah, okay.
Your metrics to forecast what you're gonna bid. I mean, that must be changing. What's challenging?
It's challenging. The more consistent you guys are with your paving budgets and predictability we have with that, the better we can plan. Obviously, everything's not perfect. So, even an outlook gives us a good indication of what might take place.
How many big paving companies are you running up against when you put them in bids now?
On average, 2 to 3. It depends on which region of the state you're in. Like Northeast King, there's 2. Northwest, you're talking 2 or 3, people get involved. Bennington depends on where the work is, but you'll get maybe 4. So also just depends on the scope of the work as well. So
You been anything outside of Vermont or are you just in Vermont?
I'm just in Vermont.
Pike,
Pike is New Hampshire. Yeah.
Actually, Pike is owned by an Irish.
Yes, CRH owns us. So
They don't have to worry about frost.
they do in New Hampshire and Maine, though.
With the labor costs escalating like it did last year and materials, how do you, must be difficult to bid on, because I know labor, they were stealing from one another. I'll give you $30 an hour, I'll give you 35, I'll give you 40. And that must be a tough situation to try to meet expectations of what the.
weekly, if not daily, last spring. It was very cumbersome. Labor was one thing, energy was another, fuel, impacted trucking costs. One of the largest components is the asphalt plant and then trucking. When you bid a project, those are the 2 largest components. And when the cost inflation goes out of control in a matter of weeks, it's tough to kind of gauge where the market's going to be from that standpoint. So it's a weekly, daily occurrence. And
Couldn't get night paving, and we couldn't get night crews. It was very difficult to get night people to work all night.
our premiums for night work have gone up. Used to be $50 a night per crew member. Now we're paying probably an average of $11 or $12 an hour premium
We could moonlight there.
to do night work.
Then you wouldn't have to buy.
The truck drive, and again, that's passed through all the entire value chain. That's not just the people on the road, that's truck drivers and
Right.
plant people, and,
Well, it's every industry. I
Yeah.
don't care if you talk to us. Anybody, like, they couldn't hire trucks to haul it because it was $1,000 a day for the truck, and it was ridiculous, some of these prices, and they're not gonna go down. They're gonna stay there. Once you give a raise, you can't take it away.
it's very hard.
It's gonna go from there. So, yeah, that's the tough part. It would just be nice if it level off someday, at least it'd be somewhat in line with for future, but right now it's just, I heard horror stories about some of the stealing from one another. Everybody's trying to get that same employee.
Yeah. Well, there are fewer and fewer of them too, particularly when it comes to truck drivers.
So I get to that.
Well, the fact is, there are fewer young people.
There-
Yeah.
What, the people in our, baby boomers and are exiting, they're retiring, and the next generation is a lot smaller. So the workforce that you have to draw from is smaller, just because people their childbearing habits were not quite the same as what we had with the baby boom. So it's a competitive environment, and when you've got a limited supply, then it's just market forces at work. So my question is, when you bid, does AOT have some escalator? Seems like there's some upper cost protection that is built in on bids, but maybe that's not right. Could you just speak to that?
So every AOT bid, except for certain quantity thresholds, anything above like a 3,000 ton paving project, every project has asphalt adjustment on it. So we bid every job with an index, and then the price per ton is adjusted from that index up or down. And so a lot of your cost inflation last year was, we had bid, I'm trying to think, we did a lot of work in the spring of 2021 that was 2022 work. And those were at asphalt indexes of like 400, 450, and we hit 830 last summer. So you're talking, upwards of $10 and $20 a ton index changes per hot mix ton. And that's a huge escalator.
But you were protected on that.
We were protected,
Yeah.
and that kind of levels the risk off. Fuel adjustment has a minimum quantity threshold. We were protected on the installation on the hot mix for trucking and at the energy side of the plant. So from a risk standpoint, you know, what we're merely passing along is the index at bid time. So, you know, most of your cost inflation is truck rates and labor.
Is the cost of the project mostly paving? Like what percentage is the asphalt?
Depends on the scope of work. One that Senator Kitchell might be more familiar with, the Marshfield Danville project that just did back in December.
That's all in Senator Pertlick's district. I just want to make it clear for the record.
Well, you travel the road.
Travel it every day.
So
And,
that that job was
Wait, here's a
They're gonna catch her in the
I
speed,
know.
they're gonna catch her in the speed trap someday.
Oh,
They haven't
yeah.
caught her yet.
Yeah, the smoother the pavement, actually, there's some, it really is a lot better than it used to be.
so that was a 26-mile long different scope of work. I think it had 4 scopes of work in it. The majority was a reclaim project from section from Marshfield to or from Plainfield to Marshfield up through the village. I would say that project's probably, you're talking 20% paving, but it's got 5 other major components
You've
that
got
are,
road bed.
yeah, we're doing reclaiming, and that's, you know, another $3 million just off the cuff. So that one, you know,
So,
but as a, like, if you take a straight paving project, you're talking 60%.
So I'm looking and driving Route 2, which I do, and I have,
I do too, but you get all the credit for it.
well, I've been driving it since 1973.
I know, I have a few more years.
And you probably were hardly born.
With the same car.
You say so.
I married the horse last year.
And I know that there's, so on that, when you're doing that Route 2,
Mhm.
and I was looking at the location of all the poles,
Mhm.
because part of what we're talking about is how to make sections of road more safer for bike traffic. And I was looking at shoulders and how close those poles are. And I'm wondering, in that project that you're talking about, will all those poles have to be moved?
No,
Or they would not be?
so
But sometimes you do.
sometimes we do. Like in the village of Marshfield, they're going to realign the intersection of 15 and 2.
Right.
Those poles have to be moved in order to construct that. It all depends on if the project is widening the road. Like that road is, I think, a 30-foot typical width. For most of it from Plainfield up through to Marshfield. So the, you know, the scope of work had us just staying inside that typical paving width and putting it back.
Is grinding the asphalt and reusing it cheaper?
Oh, wrap.
Ram. So from a, you know, right now we average about 20% recycled asphalt in our hot mix for AOT. There is some discussion in science out there trying to increase that wrap content percentage. There's also grants out there from the federal government to put test projects on the road to see how it performs. So from that aspect, we're doing it on a private, you know, municipalities that will allow it, will do it and install that high wrap content mix there.
Just to see how it.
Just see how it performs. We did a test section in Northfield 2 or 3 years ago. That seems to be performing rather well.
Are there certain treatments that only make sense in warmer climates, or and does that limit sort of what we will work here? Because we do have obviously our winters and frost and so forth. I just was wondering whether, depending on regions, whether there is a difference in what treatments are. And the reason I'm asking, I know experimental down on Route 302, there was something done experimental there, and it really didn't work. It didn't hold up, and it was
Just the Groton, the one just recently.
well, this would be a number of years ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that would be the paver place, I think, the Colton place over paver place over Colton place. I
You
believe.
had to redo it.
We just, Hutchins went and redid that 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And what the road condition probably required a reclaim job similar to Marshfield. But the agency put out a cold in place, which is just cold mix and recycling in place, and then put a heavy binder lift and wearing course over that. That application works. It's a sustainable product. Again, when you go to that process, you limit the number of people that can do that process. So there's only maybe 2 or 3 people in the Northeast that do that process. So, from a yes and no, you've seen the interstate from here to Burlington. It's held up. Some pieces have held up, some pieces haven't. It all has to do with traffic volume, really.
Not the soil underneath. That's what I've heard about the Groton Road, is that just the way the clay and things underneath there.
Boulders, yeah. It's real, like Marshfield has been reclaimed once in 2004, 2007. So going back through and reclaiming it again and adding a stabilized product, stabilize the sub base, makes sense, given the condition of the road. But there's always, you can shim overlay, mill pave that road, and it'll get you 8 years or 5 to 8 years, what we like to say. But again, anything underneath comes up through the pavement surface.
I want to highlight a point you made right at the beginning, which is about predictability. And when we're all thinking about, this program and, the increasing costs and increasing cost pressures on the program, there's, not a lot we can do about inflation or fuel prices and stuff like that. But a key thing, and we say this to you every year, but a key thing for the industry to be able to tackle and implement the most efficient program as possible is predictability. And part of that is early bid advertisements. The agency's been doing a really good job at making sure that the industry knows what's coming down the pike, what they'll be able to bid on. That allows them to line up the workforce, to be able to manage their crews who do go across state lines. And we are competing with New Hampshire and Maine when it comes to workforce, because if Pike knows that the program in Vermont is going to provide, X amount of work, they're able to understand when they need their crews here versus when they need them in New Hampshire and in Maine. So predictability is really critical, and miles are critical. And we say that every year. And Mr. Chair, you mentioned that at the beginning. I'm actually happy to note that while the budget is going down a little bit, still the second highest ever proposed. And by the way, the Paving Association supports the governor's proposed budget. I want to be clear about that. While the budget's gone down a little bit, the miles have actually stayed pretty much on par with where they've been, in the 240, 230, 240 range. We feel, and I say this every year, that 300 is really the number you want to get to fully maintain the system throughout the state. But it has been in the 230 to 250 range over the past five or so years. And so while the appropriations a bit lower, the miles are comparable, and that really helps with predictability. And is good for the business. So it's not just about appropriation, it's about maintaining miles. So we're appreciative of that.
Well,
That's
federal
important.
money helped considerably, that extra boost on federal money. I think what's year, we're at 129 million, I think this year for paving. It's
141, I think.
Is it up for 141?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
It was close to 160 last year.
That's a big jump.
Yeah.
Number, yeah.
No, it's a huge program, second biggest ever.
We used to run out of 100 million, so now.
Yeah.
But I know a lot of that eaten up by inflation, because like everything else, you see it in my business, truck drivers come down, deliver, they're getting $30 an hour, which a couple of years ago, they were getting 18, 19, but that's what's happening.
It absolutely is. And there's not a lot any of us can do about that. But what we can do is we can try to be as efficient with
Right.
those truck drivers we
Where they
have,
are every day.
where they are every day. If we can get them, on a schedule where, it's the most efficient for them, that's going to ultimately save the state money.
I was amazed they were, SD there's so many projects going, it's just amazing how many people that he has.
Yeah.
That he has to spread out.
Oh, yeah. Tyler. Sorry, we're just trying to get Tyler connected here.
Question, Tyson, tell me about rumble strips. Is that a very expensive additional ad? When is that part of the job, and is that something that's cut when they need to start making the numbers work?
Generally only, it's like $1 a foot between all of, you know,
Is that the indentation, or is that
Yes.
different? Okay.
centerline rumble strips. They're only eliminated as a general rule of thumb when a bunch of citizens who live on the stretch of road realize that a mile of rumble strip is going to go in, right down, right next to their house. And then usually they start talking to us and we start talking to PM, and then we might eliminate a mile of
They're
it.
pretty mild now, they're not like they used to be.
The sinusoidal, that's a good point to bring up, because they did change the depth. It was 3/4 of an inch, now it's like 3/8, and it's a different pattern. So it's not as abrupt, it's like a humming almost, so it's not as loud. But the agency, again, now, because of when we changed to the centerline rumble strips, had to delete miles of it off projects, has done a better job of placing them and saying, let's stop them here and then
Yeah,
continue
they
on.
told us they have a new policy. If there's a house within X feet, they don't do it.
Does the salt bins, deteriorate quicker, or because they got little?
They sit in a groove. What really happens is the water sits in there and, traffic gets on it and the plows get after it. And then
I worry about that because there are little, they got settled somewhere in the water.
So paving in this current year, fiscal '23 is 158.8 million. And the budget for next year is 141.6.
Healthy budget.
It's still,
No, it's second highest ever. And, another thing to think about, the agency focuses really hard on trying to do this is the program mix, the types of projects. As he was mentioning reclaim. I mean, reclaim is the most expensive type of project you can do. You have to do it sometimes, but it's $1 million a mile, I think.
it's grown,
Grown from
and that's an element of design. We're using emulsion now to stabilize the road. We used to use cement, it wasn't working. They've gone to emulsion. Sometimes if the road's in good enough condition, we simply just cut it twice and pave right over it. Last year we had our Chelsea Thetford job on Route 110. We cut that once. We did a big change order with the state. It made it simpler and created less user delay on 14 miles of road that's been done 7 years ago. So that one we saved some money on, but as a general rule, we have a Brattleboro Wilmington job that's 12 miles and it's like $26 million. So you're talking $2.5 million a mile right now as a rule of thumb.
And sometimes that's necessary.
Yeah.
Certainly, we're not going to say we don't like expensive projects, but the reality is that, to get those miles, there needs to be a healthy mix of that when necessary, but also on the other end of the spectrum, the district leveling jobs, what are those at now? I mean, it was.
Those gonna be close to 170,000 miles.
That's a little bit too, but
I mean, the only downfall of the district leveling program, that's 100% state funds, and that's.
What happens when you're only one bidder bids on a project? What, the agency accepts it, or they go back for another one, or?
Since I've been estimating in
Yeah,
6-7 years, I have not had one.
okay.
Usually what used to happen was they would call or ask questions about why certain items were out of line with average bid tabs, and then make a decision one way or the other.
There's not that many pavers. I mean, we know they're limited for big jobs, because if they all are small pavers, they can do small jobs. When you talk about big jobs, there's Pike, there's Whitcomb. Who else is there?
Hutchins out of the Northeast Kingdom. You have Peckham down in Rutland, Bennington area, and then Eurovia, which is like a Pike. They're out of Mass, and they did some work down in the Bennington, Brattleboro area.
And you bid a job that's 8 million, 10 million, and there's a difference like 2 million. Do you wonder what happened, or you ask for clarification? Because that's, Or is it pretty close most of the time?
Most of the time it's pretty close. When you have big gaps between bidders, it's because the plans and specs weren't concise, usually as a general rule. So everyone made different assumptions, and that can, be different cost implications. So
Like when you walk out and leave 2 million on the table, you say, whoa, what did I do now? Do I still have a job?
yeah, and also, how much risk is involved in the
Yeah.
project.
Yeah. That would always drive me crazy to figure out what you leave on the table.
Those Friday afternoons, I remember.
Yeah.
Are you using any of that new glass, oh, not new, but glass substrate that we had some language last year, Glavel, and are you have any experience with it being more expensive, easier to work with?
No, we do not use Glavel. I know AGC went and visited the Glavel production facility. I don't know if anyone from Pike did. We used to use glass, but there was some reflective problems once you started plowing it. People didn't like the look of it. And again, once someone started paying for an outlet for the recycled glass, it didn't become cost efficient anymore. And I think Jay would know the exact answer, but I think maybe 5-6 years ago we stopped using it. Recycled asphalt wrap is, the best thing because it brings asphalt back into your mixes, and asphalt's the most costly component of your mix. So we get some replacement value out of that.
Yeah, go ahead.
So you said the glass, people didn't like the look of it, so it,
Once you plowed it for a winter, it'd have like the beads of glass would reflect back up off you, or off the mat sometimes.
You were using it in the asphalt. Last
Yeah.
year, we heard about using it as a road bed.
Yeah.
Underneath the asphalt.
No, we haven't done a project
Instead of
that's,
sand.
no, we haven't used it. We haven't had the opportunity to use it either.
Is anyone else gonna join us this morning or?
Mike, were you able to? Okay,
Okay,
okay, I think maybe it's just a sorry.
everybody's sleeping, all right. Yeah.
I think you'd prime the glass a little bit more.
Yeah.
So do you anticipate it being more expensive? What's any hesitation you have about using glass in the substrate?
In a sub base?
Yeah.
None really, off the cuff, nothing. You could get some tire claims for pop tires. If the glass isn't crushed correctly, be angular pop tires more easily. But from a general rule, in a sub base shouldn't be a problem because it's going to be, paved over.
So the AOT, when they're putting projects out to bid, and obviously they're writing the specifications. So would that be something that would be specified in terms of, or is that something that you would propose back? I'm just wondering, obviously, your specs are really a key part, and the quality of them make a big difference because you have to make assumptions. So the more detailed the specs are, I imagine the more helpful it is in developing a bid.
It is, like the glass, there's provisions in the standard specifications to use glass, but you must have permission to use it. It's not something you can just assume. It's kind of like wrap back when wrap wasn't as cost efficient on the back with the asphalt plants. You can blend wrap back in with sub-base material, but the value is at the asphalt plant. So now we don't, but again, you have to ask permission after you bid it to use those products. So something the agency could do is put it in the special provisions for the contract, say we want a 15%, glass product, and then everyone's kind of bidding the same product.
Last comment on this, I hope that you're aware that Chittenden Solid Waste District just approved a bond, and they're going to make a MERV, Materials Recovery Processing Center, that's going to be twice the size. And I just hope that you're in their ear as to what you would want to see the glass output to look like, so that they do produce something that you can use, want to use.
companies, I guess they crush it to Farrell or ship it to Canada or somewhere where it goes, but people don't really have a crushing facility. Myers must have one, Lusky Myers. They crush every
Yeah.
lumber and everything else, so.
Yeah.
I wouldn't care about it. Plastic, well, the plastic is plastic. Goes in with that too. or
I could be mistaken, but I thought Myers dumps over at the Chittenden Waste
Or
District.
do they? So they bring
I
it?
could be wrong, but
Could be.
they just collect it and then they bring it to Williston right behind the airport and they're building a bigger facility.
Any other questions? Any comments? Anything else?
No, I mean, again, we support the proposed program. We'll be getting back to work. It's warming up quickly.
Dating
Be working in March.
March and April, gonna have 3 foot of snow.
Yeah, I hope not. That would get in the way of work.
It's all in reverse this year.
Yeah.
Who ever thought February would be in the 50s this week?
Yeah.
It's pretty weird. I never recall it in my area, right across the lake, there's no ice, as you know, there's 3 people drowned. That's unbelievable what the ice situation is in the state this year. Okay, other questions? Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you. As you know, I'm here every day, so if you have questions.
So your,
Stop me in the
your
hall.
members were disappointed that only Mike showed up, okay?
Well, there was one on there
Yeah.
through the Zoom, so I will. Thank you very much, you
Appreciate you
guys.
coming. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.